I'm going to take you all through our timeline. I'm going to tell the story, our background of where we started. We first published our first document in Qualtrax in 2001. And then in 2003, the district where I work, our engineering and construction division became ISO certified. And then the Louisville district as a whole in 2004 became ISO 9001, I forgot to include that, certified. So fast forward to 2009, and that's when I was hired into the Corps. And I was put on our regional quality management team. This picture here shows our division. Is that our? Yep. Yeah, that's all 7 districts within LRD, and that's where we started. So 2003 in Huntington, 2004 in Louisville, and then in 2010 was when the entire region became ISO 9001 certified, and and that's when everybody started using Qualtrax. So, and then Jeff was hired in 2010, and we became this team where we would, my boss within Huntington, they call us like the pinky and the brain? Pinky and the brain, yeah, we're gonna conquer the world with Qualtrax. So, so from 2010 to 2014, I really, I don't know why, but actually I do know why. When I was younger, I would get gifts, and I would want to just tear them apart to figure out how they work. So I have a manufacturing engineering degree, so that's just what I do. I take things apart, figure out how things work, and figure out ways to make it better. So that was my thought process with, I need to study this program more. So, and I didn't even realize that there was a Qualtrax support, back then. So I was like going into our live system, and I don't recommend anybody do this. I was going into our live system and trying to break it literally to figure out how it worked. So then once I finally did realize we had support, I was on the phone with, was it Bethany that you all had? I mean, yeah, I got really close with her. I hated it when she left. So, my recommendation is just find the people that are passionate about wanting to improve your business, and then just really learning the program itself with like the other folks at Qualtrax, or even get a test site and practice that way. Let me see here. From 2014 to 2017, we learned that we needed to upgrade our version, and before we could do that, we had to get a new server. And by the way, our server was located in Louisville, and Jeff was hired in at Nashville, and I was sitting in Huntington. So we were like tag teaming this with the LRL folks and trying to coordinate the logistics and trying to get all this together. So it was a real task to try and get everybody on the same page as what we were trying to accomplish. So another thing that we did is that we got a lot of people that were really motivated to help improve our processes and stuff that we were doing. So, and to add the people that were actually doing the work as the program or the document managers into Qualtrax, to really get them involved into the system, because before it was just the quality team, 7 people, just doing all the work within Qualtrax. And so we wanted to get the rest of the employees and everybody else involved, so we thought, well, let's just make the people who write the processes, make them the document managers so that they can approve it and do some of the work. And then from 2015 to 2016, Jeff implemented a regional inspection program at our Cincinnati office, because he was the team lead for all of the division. And I'll let him go into that more. So then Jeff left. He went to Mississippi Valley Division. So I was like, ooh, no. So, and then and he took on the task of adding Qualtrax to the MVD. And so that's when headquarters got involved, and really to initiate the implementation of adding Qualtrax to a whole enterprise division. So,
Thank you, ma'am. What happened, and I'm gonna give you all some quick background on me, just a couple of minutes, is that I'm retired Navy. Joined the Navy when I was 17. Grew up on standard processes and procedures. Okay, if you didn't have a procedure book in your hand, then you might as well have, write yourself up, basically. So I retired from the Navy in 2005, went to work for outside manufacturing. And so my title is Business Management System Program Manager. So what does that mean? That means I've got the quality management system, the knowledge management system, and I've delved into satisfaction surveys. I'm also a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt. So I've got the, I don't want to say big picture, but that's some of my task is that how do you take all this stuff and put it together in one package? Okay, so that's what we've been tasked to do. So as Becca mentioned, I started out in Nashville, went to Cincinnati, and then went to Vicksburg. So, and she's kind of already brought up is that they were using it within this region right here. Once I got into this blue area right here, I made the recommendation that we use Qualtrax there also. As soon as that got approved at our regional level, it now became a possible enterprise solution. Okay, so what does that mean? That means that they had to go and say, do we want to spread this out all across USACE-wide? So we're going from 7 districts. Mississippi Valley Division has 6 districts, so now you want to go from 13 to over 50. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do right now, and that's where we're at. So Michael May, who was the presenter in this room last time, came up with a fabulous analogy, and I'll get to that in just a second. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So why are we doing this? So the analogy I want to use is a garage sale. Okay, and this was perfect. Michael and I were talking about outside. So let's just say you've got one house that wants to do a yard sale. So they go out, they get all their stuff out, and they think, oh man, all my stuff is great. Okay, I'm going to sell all this stuff, no problem. Well, now you've got 20 other houses that want to do a yard sale also. Okay, so now everybody gets their stuff out there. Well, everybody thinks all their stuff is good. I've got the best stuff, I'm going to sell all my stuff, but once you start finding out and you actually put it all together, you find out that house number 6 has a better recliner than house number 2 does. House number 18 has a lot better kitchen utensils than what house number 3 does. That's kind of where this analogy is going. What we do individually is great. Every district, every division, every entity of the Corps is doing great things with what they're doing within their area. What are we trying to do? We're trying to get to the point now of putting everything in one spot and being able to make a more holistic view of what we're doing. That's really the intent here. So if you put up an analogy of a garage sale, then I'll get to the next slide here in just a second. But I'll run you through a thought process, and I was talking to Tim earlier because what he presented with the PDCA, the Plan, Do, Check Act, is exactly what we're trying to do here with a little bit of a caveat, okay? So this is why we're doing it. We've got success at Lakes and Rivers Division. We've gone and done Lean Six Sigma projects as far as streamlining stuff, removing stuff, actually showing statistical before and after, okay? And it is all applicable to the quality management system that they've implemented and had there for a decade and a half, okay? But you've also got other successes in other areas too. They weren't using Qualtrax, but they had some sort of quality management system. But once again, you couldn't have that holistic view of all the successes that we're having, from one to the other. You couldn't compare them. So we've already got a robust project delivery process, and the Corps' mission is project delivery, okay? We have a customer come to us or stakeholder come up and says, hey, we need to get this done. Okay, let's put a team on it, make sure we get it in communication with the stakeholder, go through our process, actually what they call a project delivery business process, and give them a product. What we're trying to do now is we're trying to build this one-stop shop, is what we're trying to do. And as I already mentioned, as far as holistic decisions. But also we've got an ability to take, like I said before, those best practices. Which house has the best recliner? That's what we're trying to find out. Okay, once we found that house with the best recliner, then we're going to say, okay, guess what? And go to the next slide. I'm getting ahead of myself. This is a lot of noise, okay? So I want to break it down for you, but let's look at it from the analogy that I just had, okay? So how many people are familiar with the PDCA, right? Okay, it's a continuous cycle, okay? Well, for this implementation, the analogy I use is that you've got that hamster running in a wheel. That hamster is going to continue to run. For this specific initiative, we actually have to stop the wheel. The hamster has to hit its head and realize that we need to take this step first. Okay, so we're actually stopping the PDCA cycle momentarily. Okay, so what I mean by that is that this is a PDCA in a lot of graphical format, but what we're doing now is we're actually stopping the wheel and we're going to start at the standardized portion. So if you take it back to our analogy, we're going to get all the different ways that all 20 of these houses do their yard sales, bring them in, and compare them. And we're going to say, okay, here's good. They're all good. There's nothing bad about any of them, but we're going to get the best practice out of that. Okay? Once we can get that holistic one-stop shop view, then we can start doing some data analytics on it. We can start actually running some numbers to say who's got the best way, who charges the most, who charges the least, how are we going to get the best return on investment for putting these things together. Now, the examples I have here are things like internal reviews, okay, internal controls, the inspection program that Becca brought up as far as what we did at LRD. So just as far as some numbers for you is that what we did is that we combined all of our inspections into 1 week. So we actually took 26 functional areas and bombarded one of the districts in 1 week and did all of the inspections at one time. So what's the advantage to that? Well, the biggest one, a couple of things I saw was that engineering and construction would go through and do their checklist and check compliance. Well, and then safety would be checking compliance also. Well, if they were going individually, then if engineering had a question for safety, then you'd send an email. 2 weeks later, you might get a reply, back and forth, and it took a month for the customer to get an answer. Well, now we had everybody there at the same time. So engineering, Frank, walked up to Marty and said, hey, this is what I found. Oh, they're good. Done. No need for a 3 or 4 week turnaround on that. Okay, so by combining all those, we actually had quite a bit of cost avoidance, okay, because every time we do an inspection, you're talking about a district commander, you're talking about senior leadership, you're talking about all of the functional leads, all of our chiefs, having to sit in possibly, 15 to 20 different in-briefs and out-briefs throughout the year. Now, one time. So you save that leadership all of that time of having to sit in all these individual meetings. And since you have all of them in the same room, now they all get the same message. Instead of just getting an engineering and construction brief, now they hear safety, now they hear resource management, now they hear all these other things. Okay, so that was one of the advantages of that. Now, how does this tie into Qualtrax and QMS? Whenever we got done with the report, we would have nonconformances, we would have opportunities for improvement, and we would have lessons learned and best practices. All those would get put into this system. So before the implementation of the OIP, everyone was doing their own separate thing. They'd send the report out, but nothing was tracked. Now we put it into Qualtrax, and over the course of 7 inspections, we had 363 items put into Qualtrax and tracked to completion. By the time I left in 2017, I think only 2 things were outstanding. Okay, now, what's the advantage of this? Is that Qualtrax itself, you can always ping and know who it's on. You can always go back and say, hey, I need for you to answer this. Okay. You can go back through and run the data. Okay, so one of the things that's come out of this, and from the previous session I sat in, is that you can build your custom reports to say it took this much time to go from this step to this step. So now what do you have the ability of doing? You now have the ability of developing what is your process capability and what's the requirement. Extract that into a report, manipulate it in pivot tables, come up with the actual cycle time it's taking by step. You then take this back to your leadership and say, hey, guess what? We need to make a decision on it. And remember, this is all happening at one division. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to get all that documentation into one spot, streamline it down to who's got the best furniture or kitchen appliances, leave that in there, and then start measuring against that, and now be able to make more strategic decisions to get even better than what we are right now. Okay? So now, going back to this business management system program manager scenario, all right, it's not just a QM thing, it's not just a KM thing, it's not just a Lean Six thing. It's now a scenario of being able to make long-term sustainable improvements to the organization based off of data that was put into Qualtrax. That's pretty much where we're at. Okay. Now, how does this tie in to this little loop here? So I run you through this. We've already talked to measurements. This would be kind of that inspection process I was talking about. Okay. When you get down to here, you take that data back to your leadership and say, okay, this problem is occurring in, go back to the previous slide, please. Actually, 2. This problem is occurring right here. It's not occurring anywhere else. Okay, put a team together and fix it. Well, the next one could be, we have the problem in this division, and this division. Well, instead of assigning 3 different teams and expending 3 times the resources, now since you have this overall enterprise view, get one team together of all your subject matter experts and have them solve the problem. And oh, by the way, they're not going to tackle it just Harry-Carry, because guess what? Alaska District, we have the data that shows they're the best in class. Your first step is to get with Alaska District, find out what they're doing correctly, and now you've got some quick wins. So now you've decreased the amount of time you're spending to make improvements. And now you're making those changes, and they're sustainable, because since all of the documentation is now in one spot, you go through, do the improvement, re-put it back in the QMS, send out the instantaneous email alerts to all the people that are in those groups. Okay, so now you're talking about this knowledge sharing scenario. Everybody is instantaneously made aware that that change has occurred. And guess what you can do now? You can set up trainings for those groups to go back in, read and acknowledge that they know about that revision, acknowledge at the bottom, run a report to see who all has been gone through and actually trained on it. So you're closing the loop overall. Go ahead and go forward 2 slides. So once you get to this point, as I mentioned before, now what you do is you have those value engineers or those Lean Six Sigma practitioners. But now your leadership is making a list priority-wise. This is where you start getting into some of the Lean Six Sigma stuff. What do you want to tackle? What do you have the resources to tackle? Okay, because now you're continuing this loop. Instead of just stopping here, you then transition over here. You build a project list, prioritized, go tackle it based off of what you need to do as the organization. And the next step on this is that once you show the statistical improvement, guess what? Revise the process, goes back up top. So now you have closed the loop inside Qualtrax, and now you have restarted your PDCA. But you've restarted your PDCA after you have done the initial standardization. Now, when I'm talking about initial standardization, I'm not talking about everything's Harry-Carry. I'm saying you've brought everything into one fold. So instead of District A or Division B or whatever doing their own individual thing very good, now you brought it all into one spot, found out what the best practice is, and made those sustainable gains for the organization. Okay. So that's the gist of what we're attempting to do. Now, what are we looking at doing as far as this is concerned? We're actually moving all of our documentation over right now. So Lakes and Rivers Division already had theirs in Qualtrax. We're now taking all of the headquarters information, every district, every division, and putting all those documents into Qualtrax right now. What are we going to do after that? We're actually going to do a gap analysis. We're going to set this up to where all the documents from top to bottom are all in one spot. We're going to see how many documents we have, bring those experts in, because the QMs are not the subject matter experts. Okay? But we need those subject matter experts to come in and say, hey, guess what? These two are saying the same thing. Get rid of it. Okay? There's no need to have it. And then what you have left over, you then tie into the higher, what we refer to as the higher level guidance, which is what we refer to as our engineering regulations. Okay? So pie in the sky mentality is that the only thing we have are our higher level guidance regulations, and everything else is supplemented in that same document. So my peer up in DC, he hates it when I say this. Okay, we're looking at about an 80 to 85% reduction in the total number of documents that we have in our system. Okay. And if we can get to that point, then we can start building those workflows out of what's left over and gain even more efficiency, because now the amount of time it would have had to do manually is now automated in the system. You tie it into the documentation, and then you continue that cycle. So, and you're utilizing, and now what's happening is that you now have quality managers, knowledge managers, Lean Six Sigma practitioners, people that do surveys, people that do internal review. You got 6 or 7 people that kind of cross over and do the same thing at some point in time. By getting this to this level, now you can actually reduce down your man hours associated with those individuals. You've already got, Becca, you've got what? Quality management, right now, but you've also got other things as far as audits and stuff like that. I was wearing 6 hats when I was in Cincinnati. Quality manager, knowledge manager, Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, OIP coordinator, stakeholder satisfaction, and internal controls. Okay. All those things at some point in time have something that comes together. They overlap. Okay. So that's the intent on this, is to get it down to the most efficient use of our time, so we're not doing rework, we're not doing overlap. And the first step on that is to get all the documentation in one spot, do the gap analysis, find out what's left, and start applying metrics at that point in time. So you're not applying metrics for how does Albuquerque District do it. You're not applying metrics for how New Orleans District does it. You're going to go and say, this is the expectation for the Corps of Engineers. And now you can start looking at that data and making those decisions off of that. So that is kind of where we're at as far as how we expect to expand this and some of the expectations we have for reductions, efficiencies, effectiveness after that. Go ahead and go up one.
Who's determining your KPIs?
Okay, so which KPIs? Because that's the point we're at right now. So I'm being asked, what are my KPIs for this initiative? And then what are the KPIs for long term?
Right.
So which one are you referring to?
So short term, you're looking to measure. So how do you determine if what you're doing is effective right now?
So we did a pilot inside Mississippi Valley Division strictly for the review and migration of those retainable documents that we have right now. We had a 37% decrease just within one division. Okay, so that was the first KPI. Is that okay? So we have to be careful about that, because the intent is not to just reduce down. The intent is to do what do we need to retain and what's regurgitated. And so there's no expectation on it, but we knew that we could get some sort of reduction. Now, if you applied that pilot to all of the other MSCs throughout the organization, then we'll have about a 37%. I'm expecting a lot higher than that.
So are you saying your reduction is an increase in effectiveness?
Not initially. Okay, so what's going to happen is that it's merely getting rid of all of that redundant information that's out there. Okay, we really don't know what that is. So we couldn't set an expectation of 60% because we're not sure what it is. Because everybody's got, everything everywhere. But based off of the pilot, now we can say we're expecting a 37% decrease. Once we get that done, the gap analysis now is what's going to be huge. Because now we can set the KPIs. They're going to come from the regulations. A great example is that we have a procedure and a process in our system called BCOES. Biddability, constructability, operability, environmental, and sustainability. Okay, it's an engineering construction process. 6.4E within that process tells us that you need to do a 3-phase review. That review takes 15 days for phase 1, 20 days for phase 2, 20 days for phase 3. So now from an individual perspective, okay, National District can come up and say, hey, it's taken me 30 days. Okay, you're good. So what we want to do is we want to extract those CKPIs out of the regulations and then build the dashboard to say, how are we doing across the enterprise?
Okay, so against you're using your regulation as your driver for your...
Exactly. Because what can eventually happen is that we get this to this pie in the sky ideal state, we can actually predict from start to finish how long it takes for project delivery across the enterprise. And we can extract that information from the data, do the dashboard to say, good, 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 good. Oh, you're a little bit high here. That's where you assign your practitioner and say, hey, go take a look at this. Put your team together. But then you're putting the team together at the appropriate level. So you don't have 5 teams all doing their own thing. It's now, hey, what was the cause? Well, we need to update the regulation. Okay, headquarters, you're in charge of policy and procedure. Update the regulation. Now, what's also nice about this is that, let's just say you have your BCOES main procedure out there, but then over the course of time, you find out that you've got 50 items of supplemental information. To me, that leads me to say that there's a lot of subjectivity and things that are unknown as far as for the employees. So now that lets us set the priority about which documents do we need to spend our time on to revise and get updated. Because now if you do that, all that supplemental goes away, and now you have a better understanding of how to do that process. So now you get even that further reduction of even the supplemental information that was in your final product. So there's innumerable benefits to this, both short, mid, and long term. So, how many people have seen the upper right-hand scenario? Okay, You got your policy and procedure manual, but then you've got the how we actually do things when we're really busy and short staff manual. Okay? Well, that leads us to say, okay, this is how we want you to do it, but what's ISO say? Do you do what you say you're going to do? Well, apparently it doesn't. Okay, if you've got, this is the, well, they say everybody's got 2 sets of books somewhere. Okay, you got one book, I don't know whether it's a mob or whatever, whatever it may be, accountants or whatever. This is one we're going to show the auditors, but this is actually what we do. Well, why is that gap there? There shouldn't be the gap there. They should both be the same. So the intent on this is to take that amount of variation, dramatically reduce it down. You're not going to get it perfect, but at least you have a much better understanding of what your process capability is, what your prioritizations should be for improvement, and being able to statistically show the level of improvement you got and what that control is moving forward. So, and I'm not sure whether you can see the bottom or not, but I love Dilbert. I swear that this gentleman has a camera in every office in the world. Okay, because I'll get to a point it's like, man, that happened to me last week, so I really like him. So, next slide. That is the extent of what I've got.